So let me show you how you can practice immutability when working with objects. So here we have a person object with a name property. Now, if you want to update this object, we're not supposed to set the name property directly. We should take a copy first and then update the copy. There are basically two ways to do this in JavaScript. One way is to use the object.assign method. With this method, we can copy the content of an object to another object. So as the first argument, we pass an empty object. Then we pass our person object. So this is going to copy all the properties of this object into this empty object. Now, optionally, as a third argument, we can supply an object with updated properties. For example, if you want to change the name property, we add that here. Let's set this to Bob. We can also add additional properties. Let's say we can set age to 30. Now, this method is going to return a new object. So let's call that updated and then log it on the console. So we have this object with name set to Bob and age 30. So object.assign is one way to solve this problem, but there is a better way. We can use the spread operator. So I'm going to set updated to an empty object. Now here we want to copy all the properties of the person object. So we type ... person. This is what we call the spread operator. Now that we have copied all the properties of the person object, we can supply any additional properties. So if you want to update the name, we can pass it here. In this case, the second name property is going to overwrite the name property that we copied from the person object. Okay. Now save the changes. And here's our updated person. So I personally prefer the spread operator syntax because it's more concise. Now, one thing you need to be aware of when using the spread operator or object of assignment is that both these methods do a shallow copy. So you have to be careful when working with nested objects. For example, let's add an address property here. So address, we set it to an object with two properties, country, USA, and city, let's say San Francisco. Now, we're copying this person and changing his name. Now, let's see what happens if we type updated.address.city, we set it to New York, and then log the original person object. See what happens. So save the changes. So our original person object, his name was John. Now look at his address. It's updated to New York. Because this spread operator does a shallow copy. In this case, this address property is set to an object. The problem we have here is that both the person and updated objects have the same address. This is the same address object in memory. So if we change the address through one reference, like updated, it will apply to the other reference. To solve this problem, we have to do a deep copy. So let me show you. First, we copy all the properties of the person object. Then we add the address property. We set it to a new object because we don't want to use the same address object associated with our original person object. Okay? So we set it to a new object. In this object, first we should copy all the properties of person.address. And then if we want, we can change one of its properties. Let's say we can change the city to New York. Okay. Now, we don't need this line over here. Let's save the changes. So if you log the original person, you can see its address is not modified. So when working with nested objects, we have to do a deep copy. Now, as you can see, this approach is a little bit verbose. The more nesting we have, the more verbose our code is going to be. This is why we have libraries specifically made for immutability. We're going to talk about them later in this section.